So,
it's not cooperating.
What's not cooperating?
My brain. my painful brain.
Damn it, Brian. That's the only thing you have to have working right now is your brain.
No, not really. Just gotta have a voice, and that's it.
So before we get into this week's episode of the slasher genre.
Broad topic.
Yes, not to be confused with retail prices. Okay,
That's a Black Friday episode.
Yes. That would have been better. I should have said not to be confused with the Black Friday genre. Damn it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You blew it.
I did. I do it all the time. I just wanted to talk about what happened last week in the editing room with the recording. Like, you are now referring to me as the Mothman.
Yeah, that was a strange situation. Lag issue. There was some weather last week, I think.
Yeah.
That was partly the problem, but yeah, it was odd. The tracks got horrendously desynchronized. It was
interesting.
Wild. Yeah, it was one of the books.
It made it seem like I was like, there were things that I was saying that weren't showing up.
Well, yeah, it was it was so odd. It was like, it felt like I was like in the audio room in the Mothman prophecies when he had like these are not human vocal cords.
Oh God, I just thought that was funny.
Yeah, it was pretty good. But I remember sitting there. I was cutting it. I was like, what in the hell am I looking at?
Well, so that brings us to our next bit on the docket, and that is the slasher genre.
Yeah, and I realize it kind of covers some of the ground that we've been on so far this horror season. Kind of like bringing a lot of that to like a pulpit, to a boiling point.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always found it to be a very interesting genre. We're actually like going through right now. We're watching chronologically like the bulk of all slashers, like on a list back to back to back to back to back.
How's that going?
It's been, honestly, watching like the complete progression of the genre like that has been pretty fascinating.
Okay.
To like watch how one stole from the other, how like two, like the ones that came out in a particular year, like all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Like just seeing how they riffed off of one another, especially, is just super cool.
Yeah. Well, and we talked about that a lot, how, those threads of, you can see how this influences that, and down the line it continues to go. And
like especially like within a genre like that where it got so heated, especially like through the 80s, that's where like the fire was hot for the slasher film.
Yeah,
I agree. Is that a beer I heard?
No.
Yeah,
maybe. This episode brought to you by beer.
Just a generic brand beer.
That's the name of it, beer. Okay. But so I know we talked about Texas Chainsaw a few weeks ago, and that was kind of so this is interesting. Halloween, which we had talked about last year with John
There's
Carpenter.
Also, which I didn't include on the outline, but we did kind of mention, there's a lot of talk surrounding Psycho being the first slasher as well. So that's also kind of in the mix here. I didn't include it, but it's definitely worth mentioning. Yeah.
So for the sake of the episode, we'll say that the most widely known one to...
Most widely accepted,
thank you, is the original Halloween from 1978.
Yeah. There's a strong case now, which I kind of... I'm on the ship for, with Texas Chainsaw being the first, but that one's kind of like more of a group kill. Slasher like tends to have the trope of a singular killer.
Yeah.
So there's contention there over whether or not, but I can definitely see the case that Leatherface is very much falls in every other possible category, falls into being a slasher type villain.
Well, where does that term? I mean, I'm assuming if we're going with which one, I guess you have to put it this way. What movie or franchise or story coined the term, the slasher genre?
That would be a good one. I actually don't know that off the top of my head.
I would have to say, if we're thinking slash, I think of something like a knife or a sword. And in Halloween, Michael Myers is just walking around with a kitchen knife for half the movie, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Sorry, I was thinking of the Terminator quote, "Knives are stabbing weapons."
Knives are Good God. So I don't know. That would have to be. I mean, I guess you can slash with a chainsaw.
Yeah,
but
I don't know. It's kind of like chasing with a handheld weapon. Weapon of some sort is like the idea.
Okay. But yes, we'll start with that one. We'll start with Halloween. And
Halloween is often like the first love of a lot of slasher fans, which is why it felt appropriate to put as the first on the list.
Yes,
we'll go through too. Some of the consistent tropes in a slasher are, the stalking killer. Typically masked as a weapon of choice that they like to cling to. There's also the concept through this whole genre of a final girl. It's the last surviving villain or the last surviving character who's often the protagonist, not always the protagonist, but they are typically like the surviving member who like embodies all the qualities of like moral superiority usually, or have some sort of like high ground that they stand on in terms of like the defining moments of their character, that usually it's like not being sexually active.
Yeah. No, and one thing I've noticed within the slasher genre, and that although I do admit I'm not by any ways a master of it or know, the ins and outs very well, but you mentioned it with like, for example, Michael Myers. The villain, the central antagonist, does tend to have more persona to them than, say, like the villain in a murder mystery.
Yeah,
there's especially in the way they dress or what they wear. They have that iconography. Like you can kind of pick them out. I mean, in today we look at like how many of these that we're going to talk about, these antagonists, how much they have become entrenched in our culture, at least for Halloween and our lexicon and stuff like that.
So much so that you have this like franchise build out for all of these where like you can kind of just drop that character into a cookie cutter story and it's going to work as a sequel.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. It's almost as if the slasher genre, the antagonist is the bigger sell than the protagonist is.
And that's where horror kind of sits unique as a genre in general.
Yeah. But yeah, the final girl that you were talking about, and if we're talking about Halloween, of course, that is...
At least these first two installments being the most notable. The final girl, quote unquote, is Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yes.
Coincidentally, we talked Psycho last week, daughter of the main character in Psycho. Yeah,
which, again, you mentioned could very well be if anything, it's a progenitor to the slasher genre.
Yeah, so I've always found like that kind of like, obviously intentional by John Carpenter, but nonetheless interesting.
Final girl. Oh my God. Oh, I was gonna say, so Halloween, just kind of a little bit of a sidebar.
Yeah.
How many times have they rebooted Halloween now? Or like,
so
we have the first one, but
we could fall down a whole Halloween spiral, but to keep it as simple as I can, there's I think 4 or 5 different timelines throughout the Halloween franchise. So there's the first movie usually is considered to stand on its own. Then there's 1 and 2, which 2 introduces the concept that Laurie Strode is biologically related to Michael Myers, which a lot of fans are not big on that idea. That was like a producerial add-in, which kind of led a lot of the franchise down a particular road that it couldn't get back from for a long time. And then you have 3, which is in no way connected to Michael Myers, completely sits on an island all its own, trying to make an anthology. You have 4, 5, 6, and then also 6, 7, 8 are kind of each their own little universes. Then you have the David Gordon. You have
Didn't Rob Zombie do one?
The Rob Zombie 2 remakes. So there's 1 and 2 for Halloween 1 and 2. There is also 3 movies just called Halloween in this whole franchise. So. There's the Rob Zombie Halloween and Halloween 2, which are completely their own world, have no connection to the original, but complete reboot. Then there's also the David Gordon Green movies of Halloween, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. So,
and those are the newest iterations.
Which those 3 completely disregard all the other sequels except for the first movie.
First one.
They act as direct sequels to so it's like that. The timelines of that franchise are all over the place and chaotic to keep in track.
Well, no, it's interesting how, like, when you bring that up, and this continues through other franchises that we're going to talk about, there's that creating of the myth behind it, the mythical qualities of the characters and their histories and their lores. Because if you look at, like, the old stories, some people, there's always different, like, things going on. Sometimes they have, with someone like, Like if we look at like the Iliad, someone like Achilles is, obviously known for like his violence and his prowess in battle.
Yeah.
But sometimes people know, like in some versions he has his spear, others it's the shield, other versions it's just a sword. I've even seen some things where he doesn't have any weapons, he just uses his bare hands to fight people. So just like little things like that as you can see throughout the tellings, how these things happen. Someone else comes in and says, well, what if we did this? What if we did that? So the building blocks of the slasher genre and the discrepancies that
whether you
happen.
want to consider Texas Chainsaw the first, Psycho the first, I would say Halloween without question like defined the genre for how a lot of future franchises would copy it and rip off and try and like play with the formula, and it kicked the door open for the slasher genre.
Yeah, and we've talked about it. So like what, from your perspective, what makes Halloween so renowned? I mean, obviously when it came out, you got to put yourself in that mindset of the late 70s.
Speaking in terms specifically of the first film, the John Carpenter movie, I think it is the hollow lack of intentions for Michael. You do not know why he is doing any of this. Mm-hmm. And I think that makes him more terrifying than any other slasher character.
Yeah. No, that is a good, to have. And which is always funny because that's always like a thing that you're taught when you're writing never to do. Like that's a big cardinal rule. Your characters have to have motivations.
And, every other character in the movie does have motivations, but it's his lack of motivation is only amplified by that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely taking a creative risk of having a character who just, represents kind of like a force of nature rather than... something going in depth. It definitely goes against, it's like, I can hear some of our classes now coming back in my mind. Oh, you got to have this and this. And then now I'm going to show you something that does everything that I just told you to do wrong.
Yeah.
But it was a hit and it did it well.
And that's why we've both said throughout like countless episodes, it's like there are no rules. You just have to be able to play with them in a justifiable manner in the context of whatever story you're making. Like it has to make sense within that world. So it's like it's not even beholden to the critics. It's not even beholden to your audience. It's like you're beholden to the world you've created. And it has to, like, if you don't follow the rules of that world, because you're like, as a creator, you're as much a student of that world as anyone else, any critic, any audience member. You have to find what feels logical in there. Mm-hmm. And it may be something that flies in the face of the logic of another creative world. But, like it's like you're a steward of that, your own creation in that regard.
It's that trick of mastering the rules, and then once you've mastered them, then you can start to break them. Yeah. Or at least understand, okay, why it works in this, and it's like, okay, well, if I do this instead, what is it? What reaction might I get?
Yeah. And like as later installments came along for Halloween, there was like, the supernatural elements, the whole Michael can't be killed aspect of it. And that wasn't necessarily prevalent in the first one. Like it's somewhat inferred by the ending, but not completely. Like he's still just a man.
You still, I think that's, again though, but that fits with, if we're just talking about the first one, the original, that fits with the character in the fact that you're going to keep him in the dark, both literally and figuratively, from the audience.
Yeah. And not to get too bogged down and make it a Halloween episode, Friday the 13th.
Yeah. Yes. One of the next big.
Which I would say is the definitive king of hokey 80s horror.
I mean, yes. Now
it shares that crown with Nightmare, but
yes, absolutely. When I think slasher, I would say I think Jason comes first to my mind. I know probably Michael Myers would probably be the more popular choice.
They're kind of in tandem for me.
Yeah, but yes, Jason is the one, especially with the hockey mask.
My favorite thing about the Friday the 13th franchise is how much it like just stole eloquently from other things.
If you're going to steal, this is how you do it.
And it like also like wasn't afraid to completely evolve to drastic, insane degrees over like multiple installments.
Oh yeah,
because it started out as something of a Psycho story with Jason's mother being the surprise main killer.
Yeah, a lot of people forget that the original one is the mother is the one killing everyone, and I guess she's having she has like a split personality or like a psychotic break, thinking that Jason,
like her moral code goes against like the fabric of society. She can't deal with the fact that these camp counselors are basically just being horny teenagers.
I know, yes.
And she decides to kill them all. But yeah, like the second one just kind of devolves into Jason it's almost like a fusion between Psycho and Halloween for that second installment.
No, I would agree with that, which is interesting because I wonder how someone after the first Friday the 13th, how did someone decide, you know what, we're going to make a sequel to this?
Oh yeah, the kid that died, he's not dead anymore.
Yeah, but we're going to do this instead. Yeah. And there goes just like but once again, like for the longest time, I can remember too, like I would just know the character. I would know Jason. Yeah. And I can remember looking in Blockbuster back in the day, like when you're trying to find something. Eventually his name got more prevalent and he got in the title like Jason X, the 10th one. Yeah. But I just think it's funny, like I didn't remember, like I didn't know that Friday the 13th was the series that he belonged to. I just assumed, kind of like how
it was Jason Voorhees.
Yeah. Like how a character once again outgrowing or surpassing what the narrative itself, and it becomes more, about the character. I think it's like easier to remember the slashers, if you will, than their actual franchise. Like here it's Friday the 13th. With Freddy Krueger, another one, it's Nightmare on Elm Street is the name, but you're just supposed to say, let's go see the Freddy Krueger movies. And you can just keep going on. That is a huge staple in that the slasher has to take on some sort of larger than life type quality, I feel, to them.
And the iconography of like the locations. In Halloween, it's Haddonfield, Illinois, a fictional town, suburbia. And in Friday the 13th, it's Camp Crystal Lake, alter ego known as Camp Blood.
Camp Blood? Wait, is it?
Yeah. Oh, don't tell me you've not seen the Friday the 13th movies.
I have. I haven't seen all of them, I don't think.
We gotta get you cultured up. Yeah, there's the way that Friday the 13th involves, it kind of has that previously on Friday the 13th atmosphere at the start and end of each installment. So it's like each episode almost feels like an episode of a TV series, and that's why they were when they were shopping it for a TV series, it was like perfect. If you're going to adapt a slasher movie, that is the perfect slasher movie to adapt to a TV show because its style is conducive to that.
Yeah.
But that's currently in chaos and not happening anymore. But I really do hope that they get their together and figure it out because it would be great. But like how it evolved in between each installment. So like the second one picks up where the first left off with the mother having had her head chopped off. So like Jason's like worshiping her severed head,
which is like, you got to wonder like how did someone come up with this?
Yeah. And then like the third one, Jason stumbles upon another group, and it's like the band of thieves from the town make their way to the camp, and he actually like stops the band of thieves. So there's like a sense of justice to it, and that's the first one where he acquires the mask. So it's like the character like evolves visually and like morally.
Oh yeah, it's not ready. He's not ready made.
Yeah, and like the supernatural aspect gets more and more intense as each installment goes on. They actually kill Jason, I think, in the fifth movie.
Yeah,
I think it's the fifth movie where like it's just like in a psych ward, and it's Corey Feldman's character grown up from the previous, and he's just having like a psychotic break, thinking that he's seeing Jason everywhere, but Jason's still dead. And like the idea for that one was they were gonna like reinvent him as the main killer, but then they spun off of that for the following installment. So it's like it just like kept bobbing and weaving and trying different things, which is what it's like the sandbox slasher. I love it.
Yeah, no, and it's the same kind of like when you said in Halloween, was it the Season of the Witch, the one that kind of sits all on its own?
Yeah, which a lot of people on that one. I think it's what they tried and didn't continue with would have been amazing.
Yeah,
it'd have been like the Twilight Zone of horror.
It absolutely would have been. There's the same thing happening here in Friday the 13th. There's, I want to say it's maybe you're saying like the fourth or fifth one or something. I just remember there's the one where it kind of ends, like you said, in like, he's having a psychotic break. Tommy's character, I think.
Yes, Tommy. That's exactly who it was.
And then then the next one, it's just kind of like, nope, no. We're going right back to where we were. And Tommy's like good again. And he's going to go.
Well, also, like, they ended that previous installment with Tommy, like, murdering somebody in the psych ward, but then they're like, oh no, Tommy's like kind of a protagonist character now.
Now we're gonna go and have him put Jason in hell, but Jason's already dead.
And then like his intervening is what like brings Jason
him back
to life.
Exactly. Like that one's like,
if he'd have left him alone, nothing would have happened.
That's so cheesy, but I love that scene where they're like, I don't know, I think it's the shovel or something is like stuck in, and the lightning.
He takes
bolt
like one of the fence posts, one of those like steel rod fence posts, and stabs it through him, and then it gets struck by lightning, and that's how they bring Jason back.
Yes, and Jason's back full on zombie mode now.
Yeah, and like the whole like first half of the second act is just Jason like rummaging through the woods killing people. It's kind of amazing.
Well, too, I will say this is one, and you haven't mentioned here, this is a genre where another kind of thing of the slasher genre is what are the different types of kills and murders? Okay, it's like, okay, obviously people are going to expect there to be kills.
Yeah.
How do we keep coming up with different versions to keep this happening? Because essentially, if you're looking at these stories from like a beat perspective, the narrative wise, it's just like, okay, this character gets killed, this character gets killed, this character gets killed. So I think I've mentioned this before. It has that sort of musical structure to it.
Well, I think that's why Halloween, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street are like the three crowned kings of slasher film movies, because their kills were just fascinating.
Yes.
Like Michael pinning the dude to the wall with the knife. And then like Freddy would always just have some like absurd dream scenario insanity. Jason's would just be so hokey you couldn't help but laugh at it.
Yeah, you could not. But like, especially when I still remember the one where it's like Jason takes New York, I think, even though it makes no sense. Because like the
absolute best kill of all of these. I know exactly which one you're bringing up.
Are you? Which one? Which one do you think?
I thought you're going for the boxer, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I knew it.
For the boxer.
I knew it.
He's like, all right, your turn. He's like, and you think for a moment in that scene, he might have him. He's just kind of,
or at least slow him down.
Yeah, he's like fighting him in an alley or something, right? And
on a rooftop. They climb up to the rooftop.
And he just, all right, your turn. And he just like, yep.
It's so good. It literally never gets old. Just the whole idea of that entire movie of Jason like making landfall in New York, like so ridiculous.
It's definitely, this is one where they just really embrace, well, Nightmare on Elm Street too, but yes, they
by that point they were very self-aware of themselves.
Yeah, slasher genres do tend to be, at least once they get farther in, if you get more sequels over time, they start to become, it's like, well, what else can we do? And you have to almost start to embrace the zaniness. The further in you go.
And since we bring up Nightmare on Elm Street, might as well make the jump here.
Yeah.
Another incredible franchise. I think that like Nightmare has like implications beyond the slasher genre and beyond horror, because I think it's one of the main inspirations for like a lot of dream storytelling.
Yeah.
Even to the point where, Rick and Morty has poked fun at how much it's like inspired things. And they did an Inception episode where they reference Nightmare on Elm Street like being part of like the dream tiers for there. I thought that was extremely clever.
Well, too, with Nightmare on Elm Street, which I always forget that Johnny Depp is in the original one.
So good. He has the best death of the whole franchise.
That is, yeah, absolutely. That, and I never knew until somewhat recently, but there was like a cut moment where he does come back from the bed, like he gets pulled under the bed. And this is one of the times when I'm actually glad that they did cut that out. Because for me, I think it's a much better scene if you just like don't know what really happens to him there.
Yeah. Well, that first one especially has like such hokey, great dialogue too. Like, because the parents are so like clearly hiding, keeping like the secret killing of Freddy Krueger and back in the day like so close to the chest. The mother just like endlessly fueling her alcoholism throughout the entire movie. The dad being just like so like such a brute neck cop. Like, just don't confuse me with the facts kind of cop. Like,
don't confuse me with the facts right now.
yeah, like his daughter like fully lays the situation out to him multiple times as clearly as humanly possible, and he still won't listen to it. Like,
yeah.
And even like the situation of like the one boyfriend's death, like inside the jail cell, not being like, it doesn't add up, but like he still won't look at it. He's like, no, he killed himself. But it's like clear that that's not what happened. Like,
and I mean, when you invite you said the dream logic of Nightmare on Elm Street, when you invite that into it.
And some of the earlier installments, it was like super razor thin when they had drifted into a dream scenario and when they hadn't, because it was like a lot of the times it would just cut like a normal scene, but then there would be just light little details to clue you into it. But I think it was like 3 or 4 that until they started getting really clear about when you were and weren't in a dream.
Mm-hmm. No, and I mean, Freddy is definitely one who the character, definitely I'd say he has the most personality.
Oh, definitely.
Out of
the most sadistic. Jason and Michael are kind of hollow shells.
Mm-hmm.
And that the drastic difference of Freddy, who has this like bursting through the seams personality and sadistic sense of humor, is such a juxtaposition between the other two.
Yeah, no, and Robert Englund's performances, I think, are what bring Freddy, what made him an iconic character. Of course, too, once again, we go back to, what's his weapon of choice. For him, it's his
knife glove.
Yeah, his Wolverine type glove going on. But I mean, he's got like there is humor too in Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, like whenever they switch out the knives for other things like syringes for the one, drug addicted teen in 3, and a lot of little just like the psychology of Nightmare is strange because it's like Freddy will his mouth will pop up on like a teddy bear or something, and like just like completely mess with your perception in weird ways.
But no, it still has that, you've got it's almost like if you wanted to do a slasher genre, you almost got to say, okay, I mean, it's in the title of the genre. Who's our slasher? You gotta build it around that character. Or characters.
Yeah, because they're the ones that have to endure through the franchise. So it's like they're the icon. They're what people are showing up for.
Yeah, even though narratively speaking, they are not the central character. They are not your protagonist.
Yeah, but people are there for the kills, man. They're not there.
Yeah.
This is one situation I'll say, like, story does take somewhat of a backseat.
No, I would totally agree. Like, if I know what I'm getting into, I would feel like, listen, you don't need to try to wax poetic with this.
That's not to say like a good story isn't important in a slasher film. So I don't want to like make that seem like my case point.
But this is not something where you would, like, if these were books, we wouldn't be putting these in the literary fiction section,
Yes. It's like I want to see Jason flip a Winnebago and catch it on fire and kick the door off the side after he just like bashed in the bathroom. Like another thing we didn't mention throughout the entirety of Friday the 13th, the consistent visual metaphor is like Jason just like bursting through a wall and looking like he just is going to the bathroom.
Oh yeah.
Just like it's no big deal to him. He just like takes half of a cabin side wall off, but like it's no big deal to him. None whatsoever. But yeah, you have to have a sense of, going back to knowing what you're working with, what you're writing, what story, what genre you're in, the expectations of that genre, and if you are going to subvert them, you got to ask yourself why you're doing that, and is it going to work? And if you do it and it doesn't, don't be mad. Don't be like, bitter and upset if people aren't fine with, the subversion of these tropes and rules in the genre. Yeah.
I think I brought this up before. This is definitely something, the promises that you make as a storyteller in the beginning of your story. And one of the first ones you always make is the tone promise. Like what, even when you haven't even just the title of it, the look of like the book, the cover of a book, the trailer to a movie, the first opening sort of
the
notes
artwork.
in a song. Yeah, the artwork, all of that is giving you that tone. That's one of the first things. So you have to be sure that whatever's coming through is what, because that's gonna feed into your audience, and they're going to bring their own interpretation to it, but you have to make sure that it's getting close to what you want them to feel, what you want them to react to. Obviously, if I'm not going to, if we're doing, like a romantic comedy, the sense of, using like the Halloween score might not work exactly. Like if you open with that song, it's such an iconic thing that I don't know if you would unless you were trying to go for laughs.
I'm going for gasps.
But
no, but it's interesting you bring that up because we didn't even mention that we're not like, obviously doing deep dives on each of these, but like the score for those core three franchises, each one is very iconic. Like as soon as I hear it, I recognize it immediately.
Yeah.
It's like for Nightmare on Elm Street, it's like as soon as I hear that score, I see the little girl jump roping, and then for Friday the 13th, the lurking in the woods.
Yeah.
And obviously Halloween, I don't even need to mention it because, it's the most iconic horror score ever.
Yeah, no, exactly. And, same with last year when we talked about Exorcist, Tubular Bells.
Yeah.
I think has like a huge thing.
Funny side note, at our Thanksgiving table I think it was last year or the year before, somebody at our table thought it was a Christmas song. And I was like, yeah, Exorcist Christmas from now on.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, but the point I was just, my long droning on points that I just constantly do on this show. See, now I lost it. What was my point, Brian?
I don't know where you're going. I'm just on this train.
Oh, no, those promises, that tone promise. And making sure that you understand why you're doing what you're doing, and that, like if I'm going to put booze in the pie, I got to know why it's there or why I'm doing it. If it's just to experiment,
been to your Christmas parties, I know there's booze in those pies.
If it's just to experiment and just to see what happens, fine. But then it might not be something that needs to be released to the world.
Yeah. There's a couple other franchises I threw in here. Yeah. Child's Play is a little all over the place.
But no, this is one I would still put this in the slasher genre because once again,
it's definitely a slasher. It's all over the place in terms of like rights, studios, format. Like it's been TV shows. It's been I think the rights for the original film and like the bulk of its sequels are held by different studios.
Oh, really? Well, who originally had it?
Honestly, I don't even remember. I know it was just like you can't. There's no box set that you can purchase the original film with the others. Like you have to buy them separately.
Huh, that's interesting. And I think they just came out with, not somewhat recently, a reboot, right?
There was a reboot, I think
was it that long ago?
I think Mark Hamill was in it.
Yeah, Mark Hamill was in it. Yeah.
As the voice. It was a while ago. My time frame's off on that one.
2019.
But since then, I know since I started going to HHN, they've been doing off and on a television series for Child's Play.
Ooh, okay.
I think it's officially canceled now. But it got to the point where they were electing Chucky as president. I know. So
that's great. I like that.
Yeah, he's kind of like also in the arena of Freddy Krueger, where he's just like has that really sadistic personality. He's like cracking jokes the whole way through killing everyone.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how it's like, okay, if we look at, let's just say Halloween was the first one, just for the sake of the argument I'm going for here. You have, like, I'm just trying to go through like the imitation, that thread, that creative thread here, or ripping each other off, whatever you want to call it. So we have Michael Myers and his, original, we don't know about him. We don't know the history. He's just this force of nature going around.
Yeah.
And then someone's like, okay, we want to do that. We're going to do everything. But the only thing we're really going to change, we're going to change the location. We're going to change the slasher. We're going to change the villain. What can we do? And then you get Jason. Well, technically you get Jason's mom. Then you get Jason.
Yeah, then you get Jason. Which also, like, we also have Tom Savini showing up in makeup and several of the installments and that's a connective thread through Texas Chainsaw. Absolutely, yeah. And you looking through it, you get, okay, we take this character. It's like, let's give him somewhat of a backstory and let's make him, grotesque. Or, he's grotesque, yet I can't look away. Let's give him this, there's just this sort of, simplistic mindset, if you will. Okay, and then we go to Nightmare on Elm Street, and it's like, all right, what can we do with this genre? Okay, let's come up with a fully fledged, go in the complete opposite direction. He's an overqualified sadistic pain in the ass. Yeah, we're doing Freddy Krueger. He's already dead, and he's going to come into you in your dreams. That's how he's going to get you. I think that's partly what makes him so scary. Is he's already dead. You can't stop him.
Yeah, exactly. Like we bring in the dream logic. It's like everyone's the pushing of the slasher genre, the envelope, and then we come to Child's Play. It's like, okay, what can we do? Let's put him in a doll. Let's have a doll be the
the practical effects of especially that first one of them figuring out the logistics of how to make, because like that's all the way back during its time period. They didn't have CGI to Toy Story it up and make him look like he's running. Like they had to do that all with puppetry, and they had all these complex rigs of like raising the floor for the location and under the set work and stuff, and it was impressive feats to make that all work. Chucky was no small feat. Like it may not be as like creatively superior as some of the other ones, but I think from a practical effects standpoint it definitely stands out.
No, but again, all these things, the characters more than the name of the franchise. I feel like the characters are bigger than their franchise, because they are the franchise. But people know Chucky, Krueger, Myers, Voorhees, all that. I can remember in the Chucky, the original Child's Play series, that one was definitely one I think that scared me the most. Was Chucky as the doll. I
couldn't watch it as a kid because it definitely did like freak me out. Like it took me a couple years to get around to that one.
Yeah, that one definitely disturbed me. Especially, I can remember like the scenes of like the parents not believing the kid.
Yeah.
And like how just Chucky's like foul because he's the vessel of a serial killer, Charles Lee Ray.
Yeah, that was like a large part of why I wasn't allowed to watch it early on, because it was like he was the most like painfully clearly foul mouthed. Like Freddy was a little bit more clever and like how disgusting it could be.
Yeah, I can remember the one scene that you were talking about like the rigs and how they would have done it back then to bring Chucky to life. The one murder that still sticks with me is when he kills the teacher. I think it's in the first one or maybe the second one. But when he's like killing the teacher, I think with a ruler or something. And like, but he's in the classroom too, like that's just kind of one of the kills that like has stuck with my mind, because I remember watching it when I was probably way too young to see it.
There was a lot of like throwing Chucky around comically, like because he's so like there's an inherent hilariousness in
there is
so tiny coming after
there is
you.
a campiness to it that you just can't get past.
Yeah, but it's kind of that one's particularly unique in that like the other killers have like a physical threatening nature, when Chucky's just like this little tiny doll, like often like leaping through the air at his victims.
Oh yeah.
And then later installments you have Jennifer Tilly as the bride of Chucky.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
She did a great job. She's kind of become a horror icon in and of herself. But
yeah, once again going more into the lore of the character, how he got in there, like because I think he puts her in the doll, if I remember correctly, in Bride of Chucky.
Yeah, like he actually like brings her to life, and it's a whole thing. They end up having a child too.
Which I'm just like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, that's fine.
It's so good. See, that's like something about slashers. Like you can't hokey horror. Like it's not so much that it scares you. It's like it's kind of funny, and how it's almost like it's borderline comedic.
There is that campiness. There is that, and I mean that in a good way. There is that.
There's an endearing campiness to it.
Yeah, that nugget. It's like that. When you're just like, oh man, I'm really craving a good cheeseburger right now.
Yeah, it's like I would come home and I just watch these like in a straight marathon, because like they were so absurd that you didn't have to like fully focus on like the in-depth intricacies of the story. It's just like absurd kills.
I mean, they are pure entertainment. They are that. Like I said, I highly put them in the way that a musical works. Like a lot of stuff is that you're there. Like musicals, you can have a pretty simple story because you don't want to get too complicated, because you need time for the songs to play out.
I think in one of our recent episodes, you had referred to it as being operatic, which I felt was very apt judgment of it.
No, yeah, I would say that it's
like in terms of like how the kills unfold.
Yeah, there is you almost like you take your time. Then it's like, okay, you plan the broad strokes of, okay, this person goes, then this. And then you're like, okay, then once you've gotten the main sort of bones of the story of what's going to happen, then you can come back and say, all right, now we got to put all our effort into how could Chucky kill this character? What's something that's creative and I don't lyrical in the way it's done, you know, sort of poetic in how they do it.
It's like also like you would mention kind of how like expectations wrap into it. It's like you show a group of campers around a fire, like in their tents and sleeping bags. You don't fully, you subtly expect, but don't fully expect, oh, Jason's just going to pull them in their sleeping bag and slap them against a tree. Like, you know, like there's something like, it's obviously that's horrifying, but it's also like there's something really funny about that.
No, absolutely. There is a sense of, I don't know if originally, and I don't think Halloween or certainly Texas Chainsaw, well, the Texas Chainsaw, sometimes there is a little bit of dark humor there.
Yeah.
But Halloween, I don't think there is.
Texas Chainsaw, especially in the sequels, very much dabbled in like the dark humor. The first one, not so much, but the first one was pretty staunchly serious.
But yeah, there seems to be that I think that little touch of gray, that touch of humor that goes in there to lighten it up, which I think you kind of need it for something, because I mean people are just getting killed in such horrible ways. It can't
be fully serious.
You can't, you can't have it all be just so doom and gloom. There's got to be that balance, even though that you'll
get your audience getting actually depressed.
Yeah, absolutely. Even though these are absolutely cheesier on the, you know, kind of like what the B movies were to the 50s and 60s, the B horror movies, they still understood that, okay, we can't just have it be just, oh my God, this all out like just blood fest. Because then you start to border on like, ooh, like it starts to get, you start to not enjoy it then. So they understood that they had to have that silver lining of humor that was going through it.
Yeah.
Or just absurdity, if anything.
And I would say Texas Chainsaw had an insane amount of sequels, especially in like recent years after like the turn of the Platinum Dunes remakes, which you had said were your first introductions to the franchise.
Yeah.
I thought that the first Platinum Dunes was pretty interesting, but as far as remakes go, and you know, Platinum Dunes obviously got their fair share of flack, but I think that they had a number of pretty decent, successful installments. I thought that their Friday the 13th kind of made something coherent out of like the first 3 or 4 Friday the 13th movies. Yeah. Which I thought was interesting about it, because like that franchise is all over the place.
No, and two, like one thing they did change, if I'm remembering it correctly, they actually have Jason run.
Like he's like legit terrifying in the Platinum. Like he's fully like going after these.
Yeah, so they tried to take it that other way. Same with the remake that they did for Krueger.
Yeah,
they tried to take
that one was weaker for me.
Yeah, but they tried to take it down that more serious route.
Yeah,
and I think
it didn't work as much for Freddy, because Freddy is inherently unserious, like not serious.
Yeah, like he's an unserious serial killer. He's like, you know, he's closer to like a Joker would be.
Yeah, exactly. He's toying with his victims.
And this goes back to the point we were making earlier with knowing your promises and how you're going to pay those promises off. And if you're coming to something that already has a built-in audience, if it's not something that you're making up on your own, if you're trying to revitalize an old franchise, or if you're going into a genre, there are going to be preconceived notions or ideas that people are going to bring with them. Your job is to either, I think of the thing from, I know we bring up Marvel a lot, but I think of how Marvel had to add the scene in Endgame about Back to the Future, because to make sure people understood like time travel, because that is so ingrained in our culture, Back to the Future, and how that portrays time travel.
Well, honestly, that's how a lot of people see time travel, is through Back to the Future, even though it is fundamentally flawed through astrophysics.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Not going.
So they had to go back and add that scene. It's a testament to that movie's power. But how they did with the newer versions of Friday the 13th and Freddy Krueger, they said, let's take it more serious. But it's like, be careful. This goes back to the thing we were talking about. The tone.
You're messing with the DNA of the franchise.
Yeah, well, yeah. And if you're going to do that, you got to ask yourself, why are we doing that? And if we are, we're losing a crucial thread that kept these things entertaining. As we just said, like if people are just getting killed horrifically over and over and over again, it's like, oh my God. Like, it's the same thing. Cooking, like give me some spices, give me some variety on my plate.
Yeah. And that does bring us up to the most recent franchise in the slasher history.
Yeah.
Also by the great Wes Craven, who did Nightmare on Elm Street. He managed to bottle lightning twice in this category, and that would be the Scream franchise of the 90s.
Yes. Which I think you are a bigger fan of than I am. I don't know.
There's just something about it.
I know you like the Scream franchise. I do too. At least the original one. I do.
I like it in like the Rick and Morty type sense of it's so self-aware of itself, and it's like constantly like, I don't even want to say winking at the audience, but like winking at its concept.
Oh yeah, it is that, like you said, self-aware and almost like a deconstruction of the slasher genre. And it's so amazing how within a short 10 16 years, if we count Halloween, so 78 to 96, you're looking almost 20 years, the slasher genre got to the point where it's like, all right, we can do a deconstructive meta narrative, as you put it here.
I think that's genre. Kind of like why slashers had a bit of a fall off, because like people after the initial Scream film did become very aware of the formula.
No, that's fair. I never even thought of it that way, but yeah, because I was going to say the slasher genre. I'm talking like, if we're thinking like extremely modern and new, I can't think of one.
Yeah, I think Scream was the last big splash.
Mm-hmm.
Ghostface, like the nameless killer, because like obviously like it's a big murder mystery is like the whole secret bottle of Scream. It's like who is the killer this time? Because like you killed the killer, but not the idea of the killer.
Yeah, the killer is still there.
There will always be somebody else obsessed with it to come back in and try and kill Sidney. So, like
Sidney Prescott, yes. But once again, you have the final girl, Sidney Prescott, played by Neve Campbell.
And they even like bring up the rules. Like Scream was one of the ones that kind of like outlined what makes up the slasher genre.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you want a real breakdown of what it is, just watch the first Scream movie.
If you want to look at the tropes of this, you're exactly right. Well, he gives Well, anyway, the one of the characters he
Malibu's
gives
Most Wanted.
yeah. He gives the playbook. He says, okay, if you're going to be in a horror movie, don't do
I'll
this.
be right back. Because they poke fun and say every time somebody in a slasher movie says they'll be right back, go into the garage and get murdered.
Don't have sex. Don't do that. Can't have it. And they're all like, no.
And that's honestly what Scream so brilliantly plays with the expectations. They have Sidney Prescott getting into, I almost said Sidney Bristow, like Alias. My brain's all over the place. They have her like breaking the rules, and you think, oh, she's not the final girl, she's going to die.
Yeah.
So, like it playing with those expectations, like that's where I think Scream is a genius of writing, because because Wes Craven was a pioneer of the slasher genre. He knew what to play with better
exactly.
than
anybody. We said it before, master those rules before you break them, or at least that would be my advice. And especially Wes Craven had mastered those rules, so he understood, okay, if I'm going to do this, this is why. And I think, and obviously you never know if it's going to work until it does. I will admit that.
Yeah.
At least that's how I feel when it comes to storytelling. You never truly know what people are going to like and what they're going to hate, or vice versa.
Yeah. And Scream is in a very interesting place right now. They just had half their cast of the current story thread bail on the next installment. So it sounds to me like they're going to be going back to basics with Sidney Prescott's character and kind of pulling a David Gordon Green Halloween reboot situation where they're going to make Neve Campbell's character kind of like a warrior type, going after Ghostface, like taking the fight to Ghostface is I assume will be the tact. But Scream also had a successful television series. These things spawn a lot of iterations, we'll say.
Yes.
So it's like they're lucrative, they're fun. There's a reason they make money.
Yeah, and there's a reason they've become part of the lexicon of Halloween and horror, and
it's honestly why like you and I do this whole like 2-month foray. It's because like it is fun to dive into all this and let it have its cultural season, it's fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that is interesting too with like the slasher genre. I'm trying to think like if we can I pinpoint something that has as an iconic, I guess maybe would you consider Saw? Is that slasher? I guess not really.
I've had actual debates on this one.
Yeah.
A lot of people consider Saw a slasher movie. I personally don't, but I totally understand the argument.
I'm just curious, why don't you consider it? What's your...
Because this is a very nuanced debate, but to put it as simply as I can, as quickly as I can, John Kramer isn't actually a murderer, even though I had a full 2-hour long debate about the fact that he isn't. I personally don't consider him an actual murderer because he just creates scenarios in which
people kill themselves, or
I think Saw successfully created a subgenre.
Yeah.
Even though it's the only franchise within its subgenre.
Okay. No, that's fair. I totally agree. I honestly don't know one really. I'm just trying to think of a character who's somewhat more iconic than their franchise, Jigsaw.
Yeah.
But
no, he's definitely a horror icon, I will say that much. No question.
So that's why I was trying to does it fit the mold? But I can agree with your point there.
Because the expectation of a slasher film is that the killer is chasing after its victims with a weapon. That is a hardcore hardline trope.
And also too,
and that never happens.
There is no redemption. The slasher does not offer redemption to their victims, whereas Jigsaw is giving you that, be it in a very, very
fucked up
terrible,
and horrible way.
Yes. You are given a chance.
I'm not saying that Jigsaw is a good person. And that's where people were starting to you're sympathizing with the killer. You're terrible.
Well, hey, it's 2024. But yeah, no, I'm more inclined to agree with you on that one too, because I think that's a big thing is Jigsaw is giving you a chance to redeem yourself.
Which I'm not saying that makes him a good person. I'm saying that just doesn't make it a slasher movie.
In the slasher eyes. A slasher is just going to kill you no matter what.
For me, it just puts it in a separate category within the horror genre. That's all I'm saying. I'm not sympathizing with
Jigsaw
a murderer.
gives you the tools to get out of the trap that he has built, whereas a slasher is just going to keep coming after you until either you kill them or they kill you.
Yeah, my only argument is that it sits in another horror subgenre, which has not yet been fully defined.
Yes, that's fair. Absolutely.
So, yeah, Saw debate over.
Saw debate over. But yeah, no, it's the slasher genre. Definitely culturally big for the Halloween season.
Big time. Marathonable.
Yeah, definitely get the popcorn going if you haven't watched. I mean, they're definitely fun, but I think too, keep in mind that sliver of humor that is in there with these classic.
Allow yourself to
movies.
laugh at these absurd kills because it's the best form of comedy for the season.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
My favorite thing about the Friday the 13th franchise is how much it stole eloquently from other things.
If you're going to steal, this is how you do it.